other things are going on outside of the office that affect our lives here, and vice versa. The last thing I want is for someone to go home and not sleep at night because of something that happened at the office. If someone needs some time off or needs to get out for a few hours to go like take a breather, that's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. We're not going to lose so much productivity to go take a walk or go out for a bite to eat.
Right.
We're going to lose so much productivity that we're not going to get things done.
Welcome to another episode of the Prosper Brief. I am your host, Jeremiah Wynn, and today I'm sitting down with Richard Weintraub, the head of North America and Latin America Global Family Office Group for Citi, and Grace Zuncic, the managing director at Manna Tree. Today we're going to be talking about building a family culture in an environment that is the workplace. So please welcome Richard and Grace. Grace, Richard, how are you guys doing?
Wow.
It's so good to have you guys here. I know when we first started talking about the idea of a podcast, this idea of having a family workplace or having a workplace that has a familial culture is something that's really stood out and something that's very important to you. So Richard, tell us about how you got to that and what it actually means to lead a family, not just a team.
I appreciate this, and thanks for having us here today. I've always found that with colleagues, you really get some empowerment when you feel more like a family. I think there's an empowerment aspect, there's a vulnerability aspect because we're all human, and I think there's a consistency aspect to this. And it really depends on kind of how you show up. I once heard someone say that colleagues show up to a meeting, families show up for the mission. And so when I get to the office on Monday mornings, it's not about what do we have to do for the week. The first question is, how was your weekend? Right? Let's talk about the things that make us all who we are, and then we can get into what we have to do to keep the lights on at our office. And so I've always found that treating those around us as family can be very helpful. And I do think that there's a barrier there, right? I think that doesn't mean that you hug everybody every day, because I don't think people necessarily want that. But I think that the more familial conversation you have with the people around you just feels normal, because I think as humans, that's what we're used to, outside of the office.
Briefly, can you tell us a little bit more about just the work that you do at Citi and your role with your employees?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I run our family office group for North America and Latin America, and our team acts as an extension for financial advisors to help them bring really sophisticated solutions to these families. So what's interesting about my job is I get to face off against families as a client, and then I get to build families as my team. So I'm surrounded by families on a regular basis. And I think you have to understand a family dynamic. We talk a lot about succession planning in these family offices. And a family office is simply a private investment vehicle for a very wealthy individual. We talk about succession planning. So how do you pass this down? How do you educate your children to teach them perhaps the wealth they may come into or the wealth they may not come into? How do you think about philanthropy? And so you don't always see the first generation philanthropic endeavors match that of the children or the grandchildren. I mean, so I think that I'm fortunate in that I get to talk about family with my clients and alongside those people who help me work every day. And I will say that I consider my team like the glue, because if you can't get glued together, you can't be there all rowing in the same direction. I think it's very difficult.
Wow, that's awesome. Grace, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your work at Manna Tree and the role that you have?
Sure. So I joined Manna Tree Partners in January of this year as our internal human talent leader. I work very closely with the 20 or so professionals at our firm on their growth and development, their goals and ambitions, and the things that they want to achieve professionally in their lives. And I also work very closely with our portfolio companies. So Manna Tree is a consumer health and wellness growth equity investor. We invest in companies that are helping us live better, longer lives, whether they're in the food industry, if they're in the beverage industry, the restaurant industry. We're now looking at concepts in fitness and vitamins. And I always say there's nothing in our portfolio that I wouldn't want in my own fridge or to be integrated in my life in some way. So it's very mission driven, and it's been a real honor to be a part of the firm. Prior to Manna Tree, I worked at Chobani for 10 years. I worked at Cotopaxi, an outdoor retailer that has a deep commitment to impact and social good. And I'm on the board of King Arthur Baking Company, which is a company that's 100% owned by its employees. And so I've seen a lot of great examples of how family culture can drive performance and long-term outcomes. And it's been fun to now do it on the other side in private equity at Manna Tree.
Wow. So it's great because you guys both essentially work with people who are investing. There's a lot of money being involved,
Yeah.
but your roles, you guys deal with the human aspect of it, right? You guys deal with the people. So I wonder, how can an emotional investment in like your coworkers or the people you're working with, how can that improve the cohesion and the outcomes in these type of environments?
I'll speak to that. I mean, I have been around early company energy many times in my career, and it's exciting. It's all consuming in some ways. You're pouring your heart and your energy into building something that you truly believe in, and you're not doing it alone. It feels differently than coming each day into the office, sitting in your desk, doing your tasks, and leaving the building. You come into the office each day, and you're embraced really by this energy of building something that matters and is meaningful. And I have felt that in a corporate office setting. I have felt that on manufacturing floors. I have felt that in distribution centers, really any place that's in those early stages, in those early days. And I think amazing organizations like Citi, which Richard will speak to next, are able to sustain that over time when it's not the early days anymore. And they've been at it for a long time. And King Arthur's been able to do that. They've been around for over 200 years. They're one of America's oldest companies, and they still feel such a strong sense of community and family culture within the company. And so I'd love to hear from Richard too on how do you do that at scale? How old is Citibank now? I mean, how many years have they been in business? And
Founded in, I think we were founded in 1812, if
there you go.
I remember
Yeah.
correctly. So been around for a couple hundred years, and it shouldn't take a couple hundred years to solve these types of issues. I do find that if you can pull away the transactional nature of what exists in these places, right? Instead of talking about, again, what's the next thing that we're going to achieve, I think you want to talk about how do we get there? Like, what is the process to get there? And are we all in the same boat? And I feel like people don't leave companies first, right? They leave these environments that feel more transactional, and it can be tough, right? We're a couple 100,000 employees globally, but you have to bring it down to your team level. Yes, it all starts at the top, and it has to trickle its way down. But it comes down to the people that you surround yourself with, and also understanding what it is that makes them tick. I think it's really important that everyone feels a sense of achievement, whatever that may look like. And it may not be the same for everybody, right? Some people want their name in lights. Other people just want to know that they're being respected on a daily basis just for showing up and working really hard. And so I think that it's always tough, in a very large institution to try to get it everywhere. I will say that at Citi just recently we had like an appreciation week, which was actually it was a lot of fun. It was global, so people felt we had these special games that happened on certain floors, and there were lunches, and I think it went a long way. People may look at it and say, well, shouldn't you feel appreciated every day? Absolutely, but this was like above and beyond, and it wasn't here's a mug, here's a vest. It's let's tell each other how much we really appreciate each other and be genuine about it, not because someone told you to do so. And it's funny. I was on a call earlier today, and I said to someone, "I'm really sorry I can't do this." And he said, "Don't say you're sorry. Just say thank you, and we'll move on next time." And I actually thought that was really interesting to me that he was saying to me, "You don't need to apologize. It's a great idea. We'll figure it out next time."
Wow, that's a really great perspective. I can relate to you, Grace, because I've always been around like small startups. My dad, he was like a serial entrepreneur. And then myself, I started a business, and now I'm with Prosper, and this is like, just coming up to like 4 years old. So it's funny because Richard, on the other end, you're with Citi, that's a very well established bank, but also you and your family, you guys came from like you guys come from a family of jewelers, and that was over 100 years old when it happened. So I would like to know, what did you learn, and what lessons did you learn from working with your family, having such history, such culture in that industry? What did you learn from that, and how do you bring that to the table here at Citi?
Well, I think working in family businesses can be extremely rewarding. They can also be very difficult. I think you get the family dynamic for people that you are, biologically attached to, and sometimes can be very, very hard. I was blessed, right? I spent 11 years at our family business. My dad was there about 50, my grandfather 76 years. And so I had a wonderful opportunity to work alongside my father for 11 years and my grandfather for two, until he passed away. He was 92, working every day, so he did just fine. But I learned a lot. One of the things I learned at that business was how to be a good manager. My father set a good example. I had wonderful people around me. And my father and my grandfather made it really clear that when you walk in the door the first day, and this actually happened, you negotiate your salary, which I did with my grandfather. I sat down with him and I named a number, and he kicked me out of his office. And then my father said, "Go back in there and finish," and I did. And I think it's good. It teaches you just a different style of work. I think a lot of people tend to start at the large organizations and make their way to the smaller ones. I went the opposite way. I started at the small one, and I went large. But I see value, in, when I think about my team. My team is like a small family business unto itself, and I appreciate. I'm very lucky, right? I work with absolutely incredible people, not just on my immediate team, but everyone around me.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate just hearing that perspective on it, because just that training that you were able to get, being able to negotiate things that, like, because it is a smaller scale. So I do wonder, Grace, for you, when you were working at Chapani, what, how did you learn to manage there, and how are you using that to where you're at now at Manna Tree?
Well, I learned so many lessons. You have formative years in your career that really shape how you show up as a leader and what's important to you. And I think working, at Shabani for as long as I did, just the importance of our hourly associates, the folks that were working in the plant and their experience, working with the company. And really everywhere I have worked or engaged, the companies I've worked with since, and even then in that point in my career, a real example of leadership is how you show up with the people who are doing the work. That if it's producing, if it's waiting on the tables at the restaurant, if it's the distribution center shipping out products, and how do they view you as a leader? And I was really struck the other day, just like something in my Instagram, it was definitely the algorithm feeding me what I wanted to hear. But Lena Neer, who is the CEO of Chanel, was talking about how she knew the names of, she thought about 20,000 people that work at her company, and that she remembered their names because she remembered something about them that helped her remember the name. And I thought to myself, like, that is how I want to see leaders show up in the world, that they care enough about you to remember something about you, and then ask what they need from you, or ask what they need you to manage or trickle down to your teams. But it all starts with, I want to make a connection first. And then through that connection, I want to drive what's best for the organization and the company. And I think great organizations that I've worked with over the years have really deeply understood that. And they haven't taken those roles and those people for granted, because they make the magic. And I've just been really lucky to have seen that in practice, and then have found ways to live that out in my own leadership style over the years.
Wow, I love that story, because it kind of goes to the fact of, no one wants to feel like we're just a cog in the machine, right?
Right.
We don't want to feel like we're just here. Everything, like Rich was saying, everything's transactional. You want me here? I'm just a warm body. So being able to identify one person out of 20,000 people, I feel like that's so great. And one thing that we discussed as we're doing the pre-work for this podcast was just that we spend so much more time at work than we do at home. And that it does have somewhat of an effect in our home life, right? But it also shows that because we're stepping away from the people who we love, who we embrace, it is nice to have some sort of a connection when we do go to work. So my question is, like, how can that need be fulfilled, right? That need of connection, that need of being embraced. How do you guys fulfill that at your work environments?
One thing I'll mention, and this is just something that happens. Unfortunately, my father passed away 6 months ago, and my team knew about it. Obviously, I was out of the office, but I got to the funeral, and my team members were there. Now, they didn't have to show up at the funeral. It was not mandatory by any means, and there was a moment of vulnerability for me, right, where they saw me in probably one of my toughest moments. But what that means to me, the fact that they were there for me in my time of need, goes a lot longer than the next Excel spreadsheet that gets filled out appropriately. And so your comment of you spend more time at work than you do at home, I think is applicable to so many different roles. that I see my colleagues every day, 5 days a week. But I tend to sometimes see them perhaps in moments of vulnerability as well. And so I feel like honored that my team members showed up at this moment where I really needed people around me to really boost me up.
Yeah. It's interesting over the years, I've been invited to weddings from distribution center employees and, weddings at manufacturing employees. I've gone to funerals. Because you feel connected to people because you know how much they gave of themselves to the organization. And you want to recognize that in whatever way they need you, if it's celebrating a big moment in their life, or unfortunately, in some cases, it has been saying goodbye. And I think, you look at the companies that have been around for a long time in our country, and I suspect some of these stories and threads are in their ecosystem as well. I think that they help keep things going because they make people feel a strong sense of connection and care, that I think is really amazing. And I don't think it would just be our organizations. I think it would be other places that you'd have similar examples to this. So it's really powerful to just reflect on that and think about it. If you close your eyes and you imagine your 80th birthday, who's there, who's at the table, it would be impossible to think that there aren't people who you worked with. I mean, those relationships are important. And I always encourage, like, young people mentoring, especially now. We give a lot more career advice than maybe we receive. We're always like looking for more feedback, but at some point they're like, no, you got to start giving the advice. And it's always like, lean in and make relationships at work, because you have one life and they're additive. And some people that you work with are going to give you so much in life, perspective on who you are, friendship, connections for future jobs. I mean, there's definitely a transactional element to that as well, and looking out for you. But like I said, when I envisioned that table, there were definitely seats, for people who I've worked with over the years. And that's a powerful thing.
And one thing I'll mention, I think when you're able to create a family at the office, everyone has each other's back without being told that you should have each other's back, right? And that goes a long way with really anything you need to do. And I also think that when you're family, you open up about things. I'm not talking about personal life. I'm talking about challenges you may be having. We can't solve problems unless we understand what the challenges are to begin with.
Right.
And so in a familial environment, work environment, when someone comes to me and says, I'm having issue kind of getting up this hill, let's have a conversation about it. Let's help you get to the top, because you're not alone. I remember Grace and I happen to have worked at the same institution together a long time ago. And I remember someone saying to me there's no one in this building that that hasn't faced a challenge that you're about to face. And so when you face that challenge, let's see if you can find who that person is, because they're going to help you get there. And I feel that way in my current institution at Citi. I just feel that way in life, right? Like I think I have the right people around me to help me solve whatever problem comes my way.
Wow. I can relate so much to what you're saying, because my first corporate job out of college, I was working at a jail and I was an inmate chaplain and I was going through a divorce. And I felt so alone. And like, I grew up in a big family, 7 siblings, parents. And for the first time in my life, it's just me at a house by myself dealing with this heartbreak. And I would go into the jail, and I was doing the job of like 4 or 5 different people. So obviously things were like falling apart. And every single day there was like an email written about me that went up the entire chain, everybody was CC'd. And I just felt like it felt like there was more that I had to battle, right? Because I'm battling heartbreak on the outside, and then internally I'm like, now I'm battling this. So I've been in an environment where there was this emotional detachment where it did hurt. And I wasn't looking for an excuse to be, mediocre, but I did want someone who can empathize with what I was dealing with and either give me more help, not be completely detached. So for Grace, throughout your HR career, what difference have you seen in the organizations where team members, they operate from a distance emotionally versus those who they foster a familial culture?
Yeah.
And what impact does that have on engagement and loyalty and well-being?
Well, this is where I offer a book recommendation. So I have all my books here, some of my favorites, but this book, Everybody Matters, which I'll put up here, by Bob Chapman, is such an excellent book. It's called The Extraordinary Power of Caring for People Like Family. A leader that I love from my life gave me a copy of this book when I was in HR. And what I loved about it is that it's often about connecting with people who aren't contributing at 100% or to their full potential because they haven't quite connected with what their potential is all about. And so leaders also have to play a role in seeing the strengths. There are tons of tools out there now that people can use, and HR leaders and managers to really define strengths, or strengths finders, or Hogan assessments, all these different things. But, what role do we have at leaders in getting people on the appropriate path for them versus on the path that potentially they fell into? And so one of the things I've loved most about working in HR over the past, 10 years now or so has been really taking that on as a responsibility that we have as a department, to not give up on people quickly because they might be just in the wrong seat or the wrong role. And so that's how I've approached it over the years. And there are so many tools out there that can help you do that. And I would encourage people to open up that conversation with not only their manager, but also whoever's helping them from an HR perspective at the company, to work on that with them and say, look, I acknowledge it. I'm not showing up how I want to show up within this company and the organization. I'd love your help in making sure that I'm on the right path that can enable me to show you all the incredible things I can do to help us achieve the mission and the vision and the goals for this place.
Richard, have you been, because of this familial culture that you like to have in your office, have you been able to put people into the right seats because of just having that understanding, just going back with what Grace is saying?
Well, I think part of it is that we all have to be open with one another about our strengths and the things that we enjoy doing every day, and perhaps the things that we don't enjoy doing every day. And I think the more open that we can all be with each other, with my manager, with the people who work on my team, the more success that we're all going to create together. I think that there's a sense of purpose that goes along with this as well, which is I want to see my team succeed, not because I want to succeed. I want to see them succeed. I want to see them happy at the end of the day. For me, that gives me a sense of purpose, but also, I want to see people enjoy themselves. That said, we're all human. And I will say that I think that people really remember how you make them feel long after they forget about what you said to them. And I think you get that if you can construct it the right way. I think you can create that in many work environments. But it's not easy, right? There's no necessary roadmap for how this works. I think it just takes some iterations. But I love watching my team do something. They just had an event held yesterday. And unfortunately, I wasn't here. I was out of the country, and they held it yesterday, and it was a huge success. And all these people are coming up and saying, "Oh, it was so wonderful." And I'm like, "It was great. They did it. I didn't do it. They did it." And it just feels wonderful. It's a great feeling when we all succeed together.
Do you treat your clients like family as well, or does this understanding of this familial environment help you as you navigate these clients that you deal with on a daily basis?
Well, given the fact that we are dealing with families, and we tend to deal with children, grandchildren, cousins, these family entities, yes, it's very similar. It's a you know some of the conversations we're having are not related to investments. They're related to these, as I said earlier, like how do you build a family office? What's the structure look like? What does the governance look like? But then beyond that, how do you get the family involved? How do you get the children involved or other family members involved in these entities? And so it's a very emotional conversation, right? These are not easy. I think in marriages, I want to say, like, money is like the top most difficult thing to talk about. It's the same in any family relationship. Money is sometimes at the core of these conversations. But yes, I have these conversations with my clients the exact same way that I do my colleagues, the exact same way that I have with my kids and my wife, right? This is, again, we're all human. We all put our pants on one leg at a time, and so I feel like the more you can be open with your client, the more they can be open with you, the more you can, the easier it is to get to that answer. And it's not, there's no roadmap. We cover about 900 family offices in my territory. We cover 1,800 globally, and no two are alike, right? And so there are some that are first generation, some are seventh generation, some have 150 family members, some have two family members, and so there's a dynamic that you have to build as you work through these entities and really get to know them and the people behind them really well.
And here at Manna Tree, we really we talk a lot about with our portfolio companies about their commitment to their cultures and how people within the organization, whether they're working in our restaurants at True Food Kitchen, if they are supporting the manufacturing, needs of good culture, or they're working on the brand, or potentially they're in the greenhouses with Gotham Greens, and just the importance of people feeling connected to the work. It's something that we talk about. We talk about it with the management teams. We talk about it at the board level. Certainly with my role here now, we're going to be doing more measurement around that and having more conversations. But we have clients too. We have limited partners that are trusting Manna Tree with their capital to see through a very big and bold mission in private equity around consumer health and wellness. And so I think you see that kind of approach to communication and family and people feeling cared for, and driving performance outcomes that are meaningful across all these stakeholders that we have in building our firm as well.
So one thing that you guys are saying is when you have this culture of family and you see people as they're individuals, they're human, right? Like they're not just these worker bees. It allows you to give them grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I ask you how are you doing, I'm not going to just assume that you're being lazy or you don't want to be here. It's like, oh, you are dealing with something on a personal level. So maybe I can give you just an extra break or something like that. So for you, Grace, how do you give yourself grace when you are exhausted, but you still have to show up, you still have to lead, you still have a role to do? How do you both give yourself grace to, make a mistake or to be human?
Yeah, it's a great question. My ultimate goal is try to be the best I can be each day, be excellent each day. I fail, I make mistakes. I'm terribly hard on myself about things that are not big deals, but in my mind, it could have gone better. I'm the only one thinking about it. It's as you grow and you mature, some of that changes and some of that stays with you. But I have found like true mental breaks from work, engaging with my kids has been a really good outlet for me, engaging in my community, volunteering. I'm very passionate about that for sure. But as a leader, I think it's letting my team know, like, I'm not having the same day today that I had yesterday, but I'll be back tomorrow is okay. And to say like, today, I'm just going to be like more heads down. There's a lot of things going on, tomorrow I'll be more on. But I want to show up for them consistently in a way. I don't want those days to be so frequent, but I'm very comfortable telling, my team when that's in the way. And I invite that for other people as well. I will tell them though, like, I wouldn't say if people are feeling that way, remove challenges from them. Don't have the work be so hard or difficult. Because sometimes when we're working on things that are really hard, whether they're technical or they're building, they're energizing again and they get you excited again. And they help you forget about the things that were getting in your way and making you feel a bit down or disoriented. So I think continuing to have a focus on mission, what you're building, your goals, your objectives, being really clear about those things can keep you on a straight path, even on that day or two that you're finding yourself just not being able to show up at the full 100%.
I find you have to set an example. And so I am the first person to say that I made a mistake. And sometimes perhaps the wrong way. I sometimes say I made a mistake when it wasn't really my mistake. Because
I'm there too.
sometimes you have to do it, right? And that's okay, right? I think if you can set the appropriate example, I think that really helps. We've been sitting here talking about family. I think along with family come other challenges. I think there are conflicts that arise. I think that there are high standards. Like, just because you're family doesn't mean you don't set high standards for each other. I think that there's a level of respect that comes with like the whole person versus just finding the good. And Jeremiah, you said earlier, if I ask the question, "How are you?" I'm actually asking the question. I'm not looking for the flippant response of "I'm fine." Like, I really want to know how you are, because the way that you are is going to help me determine what the next question or the next statement may be. And so I want to make sure that you're comfortable in everything that's going on in your day, so that I can then proceed with whatever the next step may be. But I said it earlier, and I mean it. Friday afternoons, what are you doing this weekend? Monday morning, how was your weekend? It means a lot. And it's become a bit of a ritual. The one thing I'll add that's also a ritual for me is meditation. My father used to meditate, did transcendental meditation for years. I don't think my sister and I had no idea what he was doing when he went into a room and shut the door. And I took it up years ago. I try to do it 5 days a week. Sometimes I'm at 4. But I have found that those few kind of 10 minutes a few times a week really makes a difference in the way that I am as a person every day. And sometimes we all need that break that Grace just mentioned, at the institution that Grace and I used to work together, I actually used to walk outside and I would meditate. It was right on the Hudson River in New
Mm,
York City. And I would walk outside and just sit by the river for 10 minutes. It's all I needed just to recharge.
yeah.
Because these 12-hour days, however long they may be, it's just very difficult on our bodies. And you need to find whatever it takes to be able to recharge yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, in every team I've managed, I've been so lucky to manage so many incredible people in HR. Start the meeting taking 3 deep breaths and say, okay, I'm just going to go around and ask everybody how you're doing. And it was hard for me, to be honest with you, Jeremiah, because I'm such a driver and such a goal achiever. And I'm like, but I also have a really tight agenda today. And we've got a lot going on. And I want to get all these things done in this quarter, in this month. And they know it. But I said, no, I'm going to give everybody the time and space to really just say, how are we doing? And we'd have these calls every other day. And so they kind of expected it. Other lines that we had as a team is vacation times, vacation time. And then I had to control myself to not check email throughout all of vacation, which is mostly what I wanted to do. So, balancing that driver personality with creating the space for people to just say, okay, I'm doing okay. I need more help here. I need more help there. Right. And creating the conditions for that in a routine and consistent way makes people feel like, oh, that starts to be culture. That is your culture, right? Because you're doing it repeatedly over and over again, and it becomes an authentic expression of what the culture within your team looks like and feels like.
And I think in a large organization like ours, if you can do that well within a group of 6 or 8, and that branches out to another 10 and another
Yes.
10, it's
Yeah.
exponential. And people start to understand what this feeling of family really is. But you can grow that feeling pretty quickly in a large organization if you do it properly.
So the way that you guys will set these boundaries, right? Because we need healthy boundaries. I have 7 siblings, and that pretty much gives us all a license to yell at each other. So it's like, and I see it all the time. Like when you're a father and a son, or sometimes there's just there is that blurred line, right, of professionalism that happens when you become too friendly. And honestly, in some of my jobs that I used to teach, at one point I had a co-teacher, and I blurred the line, and I had to get sent to the principal's office multiple times. So how do you guys have a results driven environment, but you also have like the balance of the empathy that you have for each other? And like you said, even having these breathing exercises, like how do you figure out the balance for it all?
Yeah. I mean, I'll get kind of specific about it. It's how you allocate the time. You've got an hour meeting with your team. You're going to take a little bit of time to just breathe and say, all right, how are you really doing? Let's all go around. And then you're like, but let's get back to work. Let's do the things we're going to do. Let's do them together. I think it's having positivity goes a long way. Owning your mistakes goes a long way. Setting real, making sure the priorities and the work that is being asked of the team is realistic and practical, and nobody thinks it's a waste of time. I mean, how many times have you been in environments where you're working on things where like, I don't know if this is going anywhere, but all those things work together. But it's not, you are there to work, you are there to be productive, you are there to drive performance. It doesn't stop you from carving out just a bit of time for these micro moments that over time grow and grow and grow and represent the type of culture that you have in the place in which you work. So that's how I would describe it. Be curious, what Richard thinks.
I mean, you said it, Grace, and you said a little bit of time, right? It doesn't take much to
No.
remind each other that we're all human. It doesn't
Yeah.
take much to remind each other that like we may have a pet who just passed away, or there's something else going on outside. I don't know why I chose that as the example, but other things are going on. I don't know. Other things are going on outside of the office that affect our lives here, and vice versa. The last thing I want is for someone to go home and not sleep at night because of something that happened at the office.
Correct.
Because that then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because then the next day becomes difficult, and then that night becomes difficult, and we don't want that. Burnout is a real thing, and that's not the appropriate way. And so, if someone needs some time off or needs to get out for a few hours to go like take a breather, that's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. We're not going to lose so much productivity to go take a walk or go out for a bite to eat.
Right.
We're going to lose so much productivity that we're not going to get things done. And I think that's part of it. I think you mentioned it earlier, Grace, is making sure that you set the appropriate performance metrics, whatever the KPIs are, making sure that we're all aligned. I find sometimes when you're managing a team, sometimes you have to give tough news also. And sometimes with a family member, it's not easy because there's an emotional connection there as well. And I think if you're really close to someone, you understand that like sometimes that's just the way life is in our everyday lives outside the office, and sometimes that's the way it is in the office as well. So I try my best to lead these conversations, trying to put myself in the other person's shoes, because I've felt the same way at some point in my career.
Yeah. The other thing too, I'll say, by building in the micro moments of demonstrating your care for people, you start to bring the barriers down when you have to have a really difficult conversation with someone. I never wanted anyone to be afraid or too nervous to come to me to talk to me about something that we really need to talk about. And difficult conversations happen all the time in the workplace. But I think when you have a foundation of caring for one another, it makes those conversations come so much more naturally and flow. And those difficult conversations are examples of the things that keep you up at night with work, especially when you're in a particular roles within the organization. Who can I go to? Who can I talk to? And when you have leaders that are very open, you know that they care. You also know they care about the organization and the company, and they've got the best interest of the company at heart. It makes it easier to go to them. So I would suspect, Richard, in your career, people from outside of your department have gone to you with ideas and suggestions and maybe advice on how to handle it with their managers because of the type of manager that you are.
Absolutely. And I'm thankful for people like Grace, right? We've got a whole HR group that I go to sometimes when I have to have a difficult conversation. How do I do this? Give me some guidance. And that's
Yeah.
me needing to learn every day, right? How do I do this appropriately? I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by wonderful colleagues that are there to support me as well as everyone else on my team.
So ultimately, when you're building this familial culture in your workplace, we're really building trust. So I'm very interested to knowing from both of you guys, do you guys have any specific story of when you guys first were able to build trust with someone who maybe they had baggage when they came in, they had bad experiences in their past? Like, do you have any stories of how you guys were able to build trust and what you guys were able to accomplish together as a team?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's trust and this concept that's emerging that feels that everyone knows about it now around psychological safety, kind of this idea they're connected. Um, but sure, I mean, I've had people come to me in my career and have said, look, where I was before was really hard. Where I was before was kind of toxic and it was tough. And I want to let you know I'm kind of wounded from it. So I'm coming into this wanting to set more boundaries around my time. I'm coming into this wanting to have more clarity on my performance. I feel like no one wanted to give me the tough feedback and the tough love that I needed where I was before. Maybe I was let go in my prior job and now I'm working with you and I'm terrified that it's going to happen to me again. And in a way, creating the conditions for someone to be able to tell you those things, the things that are foundationally like hard for them, especially when they're entering a new place of employment and you might be the new manager or the new person. You can keep that in mind when you're working with them and engaging with them. Say, look, they've been wounded before. I want to try to make them see that it can be different. At least under my leadership, right? Like you can control what you can control. You can't control everything. So I have found that to be really helpful. If you can break down the barriers quick enough in an early relationship with a new employee for them to get to talk to you about some of those things when they're present, because they're not always present, but when they are, you want to be responsive to them and be helpful and show them a different way.
I would say my trust stories, and there isn't one particular one, comes out of what I do every day. I work with family offices. There may be one or two at this point, but there was no like family office major in college. And so you don't find people that have graduated with a family office degree and now go into this role. And so people tend to come in from a lot of different areas. My background, Grace and I worked in private wealth together. I then moved to sales and trading, and now I work in a centralized group that connects investment banking and markets to our clients in the wealth division at Citi. And so people that join our team join from all different areas. And so there's a trust about like, can I do this? I'm pivoting a little bit. I'm taking my knowledge base and I'm pivoting. Can I do this? And I think part of being a manager is also being a coach, right? Yeah, let me show you what it takes to do this. And then you're going to go out there and you're going to do it and you're going to do great because I know you've got the skills to do this. And so, trust what we've put together so far. And I'm learning every day, but trust what we've done so far to like get you to that point. And then you're going to put your own spin on it and you're going to do great. And so I find that a lot of what I do is diagnose, for lack of a better term, people's prior lives and find those angles that I think are going to work out really well in what we do every day, because it's just not right down the middle. We're not making cogs here, and you have to figure out what that little thing is that back to what I said earlier, like kind of what makes people tick, what's exciting about this, and how can we harness that for the betterment of your career and for the, ultimately for our client.
Okay, well, you guys, thank you so much for being a part of this. Like, thank you for sharing your stories. If I'm a leader and I've been watching this podcast and you guys sold me, I'm ready. I want to start. What is the first step to building this familial cultural environment?
I think it comes down to just being human. To me, it's all about, how do you feel? How are you feeling today? What's going on? And how can we achieve this together? How can we hold hands? I don't mean physically. I mean, how can we get to the destination together? And so people not feeling alone, I think, is really high up there. Knowing that I've got their back, that our team has their back, I think is very important. But just being human, I think that's all we can ask every day, is that people give us the respect and we give that respect back to other people.
I love that. I will build on that by saying it's not about you, it's about them. And so make a connection, seek to understand, remember, right? Going back to the example of I remember their names and I remember something about them. Try to model that behavior. And from that, you will gain followership because people want to be around leaders who behave that way and they want to follow them where they go. And so that would be my parting words for someone who's going to start tomorrow and reflecting on their leadership style and applying some of the concepts we talked about today.
Thank you guys so much. And if that doesn't work, get a smile like Grace or get a dimple like Richard. And you got
That'll work too, especially virtually.
No, but thank you guys so much for being a part of this podcast. It's been a pleasure. Just the few times we've actually spoken before we got here, so much has been so meaningful to me. So I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, we will see you next time here on the Prosper Brief. Have a good day.